for $3. $3 and a handful of candles. That is all it takes to heat a room through an entire winter night, completely off the grid, with zero gas lines, zero electric bills, and zero permission from any energy company on Earth. A $3 solution that works on pure, unbreakable physics, and the most powerful energy conglomerates in human history have spent decades making sure you never, ever find out about it. Because the moment you do, their trillion-dollar grip on your home, your family, and your survival begins to crack. Think about that number for a second. $3. That is less than a cup of coffee, less than a candy bar at an airport. And yet, what you are about to learn is something that major governments have used as a weapon, not a metaphorical weapon, a literal geopolitical weapon. Because whoever controls your heat controls you. And they have built an entire civilization around that fact. Welcome to the Buried Blueprint. I am glad you made it here. If you believe that the information being hidden from ordinary Americans is more dangerous than anything on the news, then you need to be subscribed to this channel right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so that every time we crack open another buried file, you are the first one to know. This knowledge is being suppressed in real time. And the only way to fight that is to build a community that refuses to stay in the dark. Now, let us go back, way back. Because the history of this secret is not just interesting. It is proof, undeniable, documented, historical proof that this works. During the Second World War, the Luftwaffe had a very specific strategy when bombing the British mainland. They were not just targeting factories and military installations, they were targeting infrastructure, power stations, gas lines, the heating and electrical grid of an entire civilian population. The goal was simple and brutal: freeze the people, break the morale, end the war. London in the winter of 1940 was a city under siege. When the bombs hit the grid, the lights went out, the gas stopped, and temperatures dropped. But here is what the history books gloss over, the part they never put in the documentaries. British civilians did not freeze, they survived. Not because the government rushed in with emergency heating units, not because some corporation saved the day. They survived because ordinary working-class people understood something fundamental about thermodynamics that we have since been conditioned to forget. They used clay. Unglazed, simple, ancient clay, stacked over small, localized heat sources, candles, small oil flames, whatever they had. The clay absorbed every single BTU of radiant heat those tiny flames produced, stored it deep inside its dense molecular structure, and then slowly, steadily radiated it back out into the room long after the flame itself had burned low. They were not just heating a room, they were manufacturing thermal mass with their hands for pennies. This is not folklore. This is not a survival myth. This is documented civilian adaptation under wartime conditions, and it predates World War II by centuries. Go further back. Ancient Roman hypocaust systems. Thick clay and stone used not just to conduct heat but to store it. The Romans understood that mass equals retention, that a dense, porous material absorbs heat energy and releases it slowly, creating a stable, ambient warmth that bare convection from a flame simply cannot match. The same principle was used by Native American tribes constructing adobe shelters across the American Southwest. Thick earthen walls that stayed cool during the brutal summer days and released stored warmth through the freezing desert nights. Not because they had engineers, because they understood the earth. Victorian-era builders in England packed terracotta into the walls of affordable housing, specifically to reduce heating fuel costs for working families. This was a known, accepted, widespread building practice. It was not exotic. It was common sense. And then it disappeared. Now here's where the story gets ugly. Because this did not disappear by accident. It did not fade away because something better came along. It was replaced, deliberately, strategically, and at an almost incomprehensible cost to ordinary people. The shift happened gradually through the mid-20th century, accelerating sharply through the 1950s and 1960s. Natural gas infrastructure was being laid across the country. Electrical grids were expanding, and with them came the energy companies. These were not small businesses. These were, and remain, some of the largest, most politically connected corporations in the history of capitalism. They lobbied governments, they funded building codes and housing regulations that mandated connection to centralized heating systems. They partnered with appliance manufacturers to ensure that every new home built in America came pre-wired, pre-plumbed, and pre-obligated to buy their product forever. And here is the key thing you have to understand. Terracotta clay cannot be patented. Candles cannot be patented. The physics of thermal mass cannot be patented. There is no recurring subscription. There is no monthly bill, there is no meter to read, there is no technician to call, there is no leverage, and without leverage, there is no profit. So an industry worth trillions of dollars did what trillion-dollar industries always do. They did not ban it outright. They simply made it invisible. They scrubbed it from building education. They removed it from contractor training. They replaced the cultural knowledge of thermal mass heating with a total cradle-to-grave dependency on centralized infrastructure. Right now, today, the average American household spends over $1,000 a year just on home heating costs. In colder states, that number climbs to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 annually. And every single one of those dollars flows directly to companies whose pricing is influenced by pipeline politics, foreign government decisions, and commodity markets that have nothing to do with your life or your family. In the winter of 2021, when a historic storm hit Texas and the centralized energy grid collapsed, people froze to death in their own homes, not in a war zone, in America, in the 21st century, because the grid failed, because they had been taught that their survival depended on infrastructure they did not control. That is not an accident of weather. That is the consequence of a century-long campaign to make you dependent. And right now, today, geopolitical tensions across Europe and Asia involve natural gas as a primary weapon. When a superpower wants to apply pressure to a neighboring country, the first move is almost always the same. Threaten the gas supply in the winter, because control the heat, you control the people. Before I give you the exact formula, I need to tell you something important. What you are learning today is just one file from a much larger archive. The corporate suppression of cheap, effective, independent solutions is not limited to heating. It covers water, food preservation, structural repair, grid-free power, medical self-sufficiency, and more. For years, we have been compiling the most heavily documented, scientifically accurate, and practically tested of these buried solutions into a single resource. It is called the Complete Buried Blueprint Vault. And the link to access it is in the description below this video. Dozens of classified survival and home DIY guides, practical, tested, independent, everything the industry does not want inside your house. Check the description, bookmark it, share it with someone you trust. But stay right here, because exactly how you apply this changes everything. Now, the science. Because this is not magic. This is physics, and understanding why it works is what will make you confident enough to actually use it. When a tealight candle burns, it produces convective heat. That is heat that rises as warm air. In an open room, that warm air disperses immediately. It hits the ceiling. It bleeds out through gaps in walls and windows. It is inefficient, dramatically inefficient. In fact, a bare candle flame in an open room converts only a small fraction of its total energy output into usable ambient warmth. The rest is lost. Now, place a dense, unglazed terracotta pot over that flame, upside down. Something extraordinary happens at the molecular level. The clay, which is a highly porous, mineral-rich ceramic material, begins to absorb the radiant and convective heat that would otherwise escape. But it does not just hold it, it converts it. The porous structure of unglazed terracotta has an exceptionally high specific heat capacity. That means it can store a large amount of thermal energy per unit of mass before its own surface temperature rises. It is essentially a thermal battery. As the clay charges up with stored heat energy, it then begins to radiate that energy back outward in all directions, not as a hot jet of air rising to the ceiling, but as long-wave infrared radiation. The same kind of heat you feel from a warm brick wall, the same kind of heat your body absorbs from sunlight. Radiant heat does not heat the air, it directly heats objects and people in its path, which means it is not wasted on the ceiling, it goes directly into you. The two-pot system amplifies this dramatically. The inner pot creates a sealed thermal chamber around the flame, forcing almost all convective output into the clay rather than the room air. The outer pot acts as a secondary radiator, creating a layered thermal shell. The gap between the two pots is not just empty space. It is a critical airflow channel that regulates combustion and prevents overheating while maintaining continuous heat absorption into the outer layer. Together, the two pots convert the candle from an inefficient point source of rising warm air into a dense, omnidirectional radiant heater. The clay stores heat for far longer than the candle burns. When the candles burn out, the pots continue to radiate warmth for an extended period after. This is the same principle behind a masonry heater, which in parts of Northern Europe and Scandinavia have been used for centuries to heat entire homes with a single, brief burn of wood, because the dense stone and clay mass absorbs the heat of combustion and slowly releases it over 12 to 24 hours. The commercial masonry heater industry charges thousands of dollars for that same basic physics. You are going to do it for free. Here is exactly what you need. Go to any hardware store, garden center, or home improvement retailer. You are looking for 2 unglazed terracotta clay pots. The word unglazed is critical. Do not buy glazed pots. A glazed ceramic surface has a coating that significantly reduces its thermal absorption and radiation properties and can release harmful fumes when heated. You want raw, natural, unfinished terracotta, the kind used for planting. Buy 1 small pot, approximately 4 to 5 inches in diameter, and 1 medium pot, approximately 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Combined cost at most hardware or garden stores is between $2 and $4, sometimes less. You will also need tealight candles, standard, unscented tea lights. Do not use scented candles in an enclosed indoor space if you can avoid it. Unscented tea lights are the cleanest burning and the safest for indoor use. A pack of 100 tea lights typically costs between $3 and $5. You have fuel for dozens of hours of operation. Now here is the setup. Find a stable, completely non-flammable surface. A ceramic tile, a concrete block, a cast iron trivet, or a metal baking sheet. Do not set this up on wood, carpet, fabric, or any other flammable surface. Place 3 tea lights in a small grouping on your non-flammable base, with a small gap between them and the edge of your surface. Light them. Allow them to establish a full flame before placing the pots. Take the smaller terracotta pot and place it upside down directly over the 3 tea lights, centered. If your pot has a drainage hole in the bottom, which it will, that hole is now facing upward, and it serves as a vent and heat exhaust port. That is intentional. Do not block it. Now take the larger terracotta pot and place it upside down over the smaller one, also centered. The larger pot should rest on the surface around the smaller pot, leaving a gap of roughly an inch at the base perimeter. This gap is your primary airflow intake. Air draws in at the bottom, feeds the candle combustion, and the thermal energy is captured by both pot layers before what little escapes does so through the top vent. Allow the system to run for 10 to 15 minutes before expecting significant radiant output. The clay needs time to charge. Once it is charged, place your hand 6 to 8 inches from the outer pot surface. You will feel a steady, gentle, consistent warmth radiating outward, not a blast of hot air, a field of radiant heat. For safety, always operate this heater in a room with adequate ventilation. A slightly cracked window is sufficient. Candles do consume oxygen and produce carbon dioxide during combustion. Never seal yourself in a completely airtight space with any open flame heat source. Do not leave it unattended or run it while you sleep without first ensuring that it is on a completely stable, fireproof surface and cannot be knocked over by pets, children, or movement. Keep flammable materials at least 2 feet away from the unit in all directions. These are basic common sense precautions, and if you follow them, this system is extraordinarily safe. Now let us talk about what this actually means for you. A licensed HVAC contractor for a new heating system installation, depending on your home and region, can run anywhere from $3,000 to $12,000. A single season of natural gas heating in a northern state can cost $1,500 to $2,500. A portable electric space heater, the kind sold at every big box store, costs $40 to $80 to buy, and then pulls significant wattage from your grid electricity every hour it runs, adding meaningfully to your monthly bill every single month. What you just built cost you $3. The tea lights to run it for a full night cost less than 50 cents. For a bedroom, a small office, or any confined space, this system produces genuine, measurable warmth. It is not a primary heating system for a large open floor plan. It is exactly what it was designed to be: an independent, grid-free, infrastructure-free thermal refuge for a single room. The room where your family sleeps. The room that matters most when the grid goes down. The room that, in 2021, in Texas, people would have given anything to keep warm. The energy industry prays every single day that you never watch a video like this one, because your dependency is their revenue, your vulnerability is their leverage, your fear of the cold is their pricing power. The moment you understand that $3 of baked earth and 5 cents of wax can stand between your family and a freezing night, their trillion-dollar infrastructure loses a piece of its grip on your life. That is why this knowledge was buried. Not because it failed, not because something better replaced it, but because it works perfectly, forever, and it cannot be billed to your account. If this video opened your eyes, do not keep it to yourself. Share it. The knowledge only stays powerful if it spreads. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell so you never miss another buried file. And check the link in the description for the complete buried blueprint vault, where we have compiled dozens of these forgotten, suppressed, and deliberately hidden solutions into one place. The next blueprint opens soon, and what's inside is even heavier.